whatever this is. I'm so thrilled to be back with another interview. And today, this is my friend Brian Allen. We met way back in 2010, so well over a decade. And I have always been chuckling with his stories. And some of that was because we're of an age. So it would be comparing his stories and my stories. But I have to tell you, me living and growing up in Southern Ontario, even Brian's stories of Northern Saskatchewan were different from what I knew. His stories were almost more like what I would hear from my mom and dad instead. So it's an amazing piece of history that I didn't want to let go by. Welcome, Brian Allen.
Thank you.
I'm so happy that you agreed to come and share.
You may want to hold off on that until the end, and you're still happy.
I'll still be happy. I love your stories. I'm just going to get us kicked off here. Brian, what would you like to tell us about yourself today at the moment? And I know you're pretty private, so just whatever you want to say. Who are you, Brian Allen?
Well, really, not much of anybody, you get right down to it. I grew up in Northern Saskatchewan. I joined the military. I spent 30 years in that and sort of got interested in electronics, and I've been a nerd ever since.
That's interesting because your history with computers and technology went to that ever curious mind of yours. And you were into it when you had to order those kits. What was that? The kits you had to order and build it yourself?
Well, they didn't have the pre-built at the time. So if you wanted to play around with it, you sort of had to get your own, had to know a little bit and had to be interested enough to actually go to the effort of making what you needed. Like my first computer, a huge 16 kilobyte of memory. Well, considering that today we figure 16 gigabytes is just barely adequate, that was quite a while ago. But there was no way of storing it. Every time you used the computer, you had to type in your program all over again, which got old rather quickly. So I took a standard, and other people did the same thing as well. It wasn't that I was a genius, but I took an old cassette tape player and then built an interface that I could connect to the computer so that I could store my program on the cassette player and then load it back from that. It was a rather finicky procedure because until you got the volume just exactly right, so you'd be flipping the little volume knob back and forth trying to get it just absolutely perfect. But eventually it worked.
I love. Oh, there's more of technology for you.
Yeah.
That's okay. Technology is all around you because you love it. Me, I say, oh, can't live without it and can't live with it. We don't even talk the same language, and still you manage to find your way through fixing me up on the computer. But I was chuckling because it goes back so far in the computer world that actually your curiosity, and this wouldn't happen very easily today, your curiosity in technology and all of that stuff actually worked out well. You were in the military, and they said, well, I guess we have to get into the world of technology. Hey, Brian, you already know a little bit about it. And you stepped right into a whole career because of that. And I think it's important because even today, entrepreneurs open up new businesses on ideas that hadn't existed before. So it's almost the same thing. And so tell me a little bit about your history in the military of ending up stepping into computers.
Well, I don't really know. More like everybody else, a series of accidents happening to be in a place where somebody needed something, and you were the only one available to do it. So it really wasn't by design. It was a matter of, oh, okay, this is a job that needs to be done. So you figure out a way to do it. Like I started out with radio communications. My uncle was a ham radio operator, so I was always interested in what he did. And I guess I had a little bit of a leaning that way before I joined the military. So when I got to the military, I went through boot camp, and they were busy giving you all these lovely little tests to see what you're capable of handling. I already had some familiarity with electronics. So they said, okay, fine, you're an electronics tech. Well, that was interesting because I had never seen electronics other than what my uncle had, but okay. So went through that. Early in my career, about the first posting I had, they decided that, we need to send somebody off on an early form of digital communications. It wasn't a computer, but it was a method of compressing communications for aircraft into a very short burst so it couldn't be intercepted. Well, I got a phone call at work, and I was told, go back to barracks, pack up your belongings. There'll be a driver there to pick you up, stop at headquarters and pick up your paycheck. You're on your way to Biloxi, Mississippi. Considering I was at that time in up near Sudbury, Ontario, and it was February, there was a little bit of a difference in culture, in weather, in everything you care to name. And I went from around 35, 40 below in Northern Ontario to around the same above in southern U.S. So that sort of pushed me into that general digital communications field, and from there my training sort of continued more or less pushing towards that areas. So I say it was total accident. They needed somebody to fill a spot on a course. They didn't want to let anybody that was actually worthwhile and trained go. So, hey, send Allen. He isn't any good anyway.
And that's all. I love the way, actually, I'm on a little bit of a tangent here because I'm thinking about entrepreneurs that would be listening in as well, to recognize that so much of what we do, first, we have to do what we enjoy. And secondly, if we're doing what we enjoy, the opportunities will come along in some form. And so you've continued right on through till today. You're still active in computers. I know you're not just as up to date as you would want to be in terms of getting into it, but you still amaze me. And you always help me because we collect up laptops and phones and so on for Uganda and other people here in Canada that need help. And several immigrants have received laptops from you that somebody's donated, and you've done the government clean, so it's private, and then you've set it up for the needs here. How has that worked out for you?
Yeah. All along, when I look back, there's been all sorts of people who have given me a hand along the way. And there's no way on earth that I can possibly pay that back. So the big part of the satisfaction was, okay, I can't pay back, but I can put my contribution forward. And with any luck, it'll do somebody else some good down the road. I mean, there's been all sorts of people who gave me a huge lift. I was coming back one time from base. I was off on leave early in my military career when we got something like $92 a month for pay, plus room and board, of course. So, but the pay wasn't exactly enriching, put it that way. So I was trying to get back to base, and I'd sort of run out of money, which wasn't unusual. And this fellow in the bus depot, I spent my last couple of dollars getting a bus ticket to get back to base, and got to talking with the ticket agent there. Well, at the time, $10, we're talking, this would be 65 years ago. At the time, $10 was a lot of money. He handed me $10 so I'd have something to eat to get back to the base with. So there's been things like that all along. And yeah, the donations started because I had a whole bunch of leftover equipment from when I was in my working career. And I thought, okay, these parts have got to be good for something. I hate to just throw things out. So I pulled them to whatever I could find together, built a couple of desktops, and donated them to the local charity in the town I was living in. And I just sort of took off because people, oh, you do that? Well, yeah, I will. And the next thing I knew, there was a regular inflow of desktops, laptops. People were saying that, hey, if you've got an old machine, let Brian know, he'll do something with it. So again, it's a matter of just falling into it, not real planning or anything else, but it gives me a great deal of satisfaction because I'm finally able to give back to some of the people who gave to me.
And I know that you've been gratified because people pop off an email to you to say, still thinking of you. And it's been such a blessing that you gave us, for our children, got their computer so they could do their school work. And you've had some lovely stories from there. And I know that when I took computers and cell phones over to Uganda, they were put to excellent use as well. People's lives can blossom when we can just reach out and give them a little bit of a hand up.
Yeah, there's been a couple of times that have been particularly gratifying that I've heard, one young lady needed a computer. She was a refugee from Syria. And she ended up winning a couple of awards with the work she was able to do. So I got a little bit of the feedback from her. I haven't heard any more for years, but it was nice to know that, yeah, that worked for her. It did her good.
That's amazing. I love the way we've gotten started off. I know we're a little off track. It's not even in my story in my article about getting into the computer world. But I think it's really important for people to understand that just because we're getting a little older doesn't mean we're parked in the parking lot somewhere. The wisdom of aging is critical to helping newer generations move along. But we don't always remember just exactly where we came from. And certainly my children, I know my family and your family too, are going to really enjoy hearing and having this as a bit of a history as well. I'm excited to hear about growing up in Northern Saskatchewan, because Northern Saskatchewan, when you were a boy, and Southern Ontario, when I was a little girl, turns out that it's quite different. So like I say, your stories almost they keep bringing me back to remembering my dad and the stories he could tell. But Northern Saskatchewan probably accelerated some of that older story. I think you were about 4 years old, and I'm going to start there. You were about 4 years old, you said, when your dad had come back from the army. I'm going to let you take it on. And how the Northern Saskatchewan even happened.
Well, the Northern Saskatchewan part, Dad came back. My earliest memory is approximately 4 of actually seeing my father. Prior to that, he was in the war, and I've got a couple earlier memories, but they don't deal with the family as such. But Yeah, and Dad came back. The earliest memory I have of him specifically, he took me out on the back porch of the house we were living in at the time, and it was at night. And probably illegally, in fact, knowing my father, just about guaranteed illegally, he'd brought back some tracer ammunition with him. So he took and fired this tracer bullet up into the sky. And I was watching this firefly go soaring across the night sky. And that's my earliest memory of I don't know what he was showing or trying to show me, or if he was just showing me a pretty light or whatever, but that's the earliest memory I have of him. But we ended up moving to Saskatchewan, I guess, or into Northern Saskatchewan. I would have been about 6 at the time, just turned 6. And the reason was when any of the military, the Army, military in general, came back from the war, the federal government had a program allowing them to apply for and obtain, I think it was just a quarter section of land, but in any case, they were allowed to just claim this amount of land in the northern Saskatchewan area, and probably through northern Alberta, Manitoba as well. I don't know the details.
What would be a quarter section in acres or?
A section is 640 acres. So,
okay. I grew up on a farm of 100 acres. So that would have been the size of six of my little farms in our southern Ontario mixed farming.
Yeah, I mean, even when I was growing up, anything under a quarter section was really small. Most of them had managed to get together at least a section. And now you're talking, they've conglomerated more and more, and it's almost impossible for a young family to get started in farming. The scale, the cost of the machinery, and you're talking farms of 10, 15,000 acres.
Wow.
So,
I mean, my whole community, I was thinking it was 40 families. My sister says, no, it was like 25 families. So out of our whole community where I grew up, 25 farms of 100 acres each, average 2,500 acres was my entire community. 2,500, and you're saying 10 to 15,000 acres is
now, yes,
what's necessary now out west.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, you laughed when I talked about the farm, and you said, "Oh, 100 acres." Well, that was just the dooryard, just the yard around the house out west.
I may have exaggerated a little bit.
I know you like to exaggerate, but you're not exaggerating on these numbers. That is just blowing my mind.
So, yeah, anyhow, yeah, the dad got the grant, applied and got the grant, and we moved from southern Saskatchewan up to northern. Well, I've thought about it on more than one occasion, and the grants that were given, basically the people that picked up on them were a second wave of settlers. The earliest settlers came into Canada when they were trying to open up the West. They were paying steam fares. They were paying their passageway over to Canada, trying to fill up the prairies, because they were really strongly afraid of the Americans moving in and claiming parts of Canada because it was pretty well unoccupied. Well, that settled the prairies, but the northern areas, that was all forest. It was really not overly attractive. Lumbering, things like that, but nothing in the way of full development. So this was a way of getting people up there, opening the country up, and building up value and rewarding the people that were in the army. So the bit was, you were given so much, a deed to so much, with the provision that you had to make so many improvements on it in a set period of time, like clear so many acres. And clearing acres of all that bush and pulling all those roots out so that the farm machinery could get in and work it was a lot of work, and I never want to do it again.
I recall you often saying, no, when I was 16 or whatever, I was out of there. I wasn't going to do farming.
No, it was entirely too much like work. I've told people, joking, but I've told people with some degree of truth that I left the farm, joined the military, and I haven't worked since. Well, that's a bit of a joke in that I've been contributing, but as far as hard physical labor, I've never had to do the same sort of thing as I did with on the farm.
Yeah, yeah. So let's move up into Northern Saskatchewan here. I'm just taking a look over here at my notes, the article that you've got. So your dad got the land, and that's a great history story to understand the settlement that came in. But I kind of was asking you, okay, so was there a house there? Or, I'm thinking about when the original pioneers came over. I mean, there was no house. They had to clear the land, use that trees to build a house so they could have protection. But I know you were small, and Dad went ahead and left you and Mom behind. But there must have been, you remembered that there was a house, so maybe it was already there. I don't know.
Yeah, we moved into a dwelling. How it got there, I know I wasn't there when it was built, because when we moved up, we were living in a house.
Right.
So, and they say, I would have been just turned 6. I obviously wasn't involved in all of the family planning and discussions, and I really have no idea of how the house was built or showed up, or whether Dad bought one, whether he built it. I know he built all sorts of farm buildings for sure, so he could quite easily have built the house, but I don't know.
You know what always fascinated me as well with your stories? I've heard so many of them so often that I just knew I had to have this conversation. But you said, and I can't imagine how it was done, but you said you'd move the house. The house literally was moved from spot to spot. How and why?
All of the farm buildings where the house was put up on a heavier skids, like the house was not built on the ground. We did not have a basement. We did not have a foundation. Our foundation was these fairly heavy logs that were put underneath as skids. And the reason for the house wouldn't have been quite as necessary, but it was still the same way. And the reason for having the farm buildings, for instance, the granaries and that, the barn wasn't, but the granaries and things like that was because Saskatchewan, everywhere, I guess, other than Alberta, has lots of rats. So the rats, of course, would be gathered underneath the building, granaries and that, where they could get access to the stored grain. So a couple of times a year, spring and fall, Dad would hook the tractor up to the skids and pull the building along for the short distance. Well, that would expose all of the rats, and there'd be definite rat cleanup and slaughter, and the dogs would be in there snapping away like crazy, and the rest of the family would be there with a club trying to knock off every rat we could.
Oh, wow.
So it was pest control is what it was, trying to keep the pests down below the occupation level.
Oh man, that's fascinating. I remember just on even when I was little, we would be stooking the grain. And when you were doing that or got throwing it up onto the wagon, you'd be uncovering, and then there'd be all the mice. We just had mice under there generally, but you'd have a whole nest of mice, and it was the same thing. You'd call the dog over, and choop, 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 choop. Those little mice were gone.
Yep.
Rats. I didn't have to deal with much for rats that I remember.
Well, we had a lot of them. I got my first rifle when I was 12, I believe, and Dad paid a bounty, something like a penny a rat. So I'd go out and shoot all the rats that I could, and the penny pretty well covered the cost of the shell. That was about it. But Dad also was really a very good shot. He won several shooting competitions around the local area, and he would get a little bit irritable if I took a shot and didn't have something come back with it. So I learned to shoot, never as good as he was, but I did learn to shoot, and I didn't get in trouble too often.
So that's the story of the house. The other story of the house that always gets me is you were the oldest in the family, so you were the first one, but then some other siblings came along behind. But you've often said, you'd have to go to bed. And where did you go to bed?
Well, that was actually not the first place. By that time, Dad sold out the farm that he was originally given title to, and bought another one nearer to the main town.
Okay.
So that one was a much more settled and developed area. I mean, we had a basement.
Oh.
It was rather a small house, and it was rather a small basement, but we had a basement. Concrete even. So we were right up in the heights of civilization. The trouble being, we were a family of 3 brothers, 1 sister, and parents. So 6 people. There was only 1 bedroom.
Oh.
And I don't know why the fellow we bought the house from thought it would be a good idea to have a bathtub, because he had no running water. But he had a full bathtub in the house. So my sister was, let's see, I was 14. My sister would have been about 5, I guess, 4 or 5. At any rate, parents took and filled the bathtub with bedding and mattress, whatever, of one sort or another. And that was my sister's bed. Okay, so that took care of 2 people or 2 rooms, but we still had 3 boys to put us. Okay, right. The only place left is in the attic. I mean, there's only a kitchen, a small living room, the bedroom, and the bathroom. That's it for downstairs. So attic it was. And we had a shed, sort of a weather shed off the main entrance to try and protect a little bit of the cold air coming in. And we'd go out, crawl up a ladder up on top of the shed, walk across the shed roof, and there's a little opening into the attic. And somehow or other, Dad managed to fit a bed in through that. So that's where we slept. Out we go up the ladder into the attic, which you'd think that wouldn't be too bad because all the hot air rises. Yeah, but unfortunately, the furnace didn't go all night, and there was a lot of. We were burning wood. You put on an old space heater type of deal, and it just sort of smoldered. It did not keep much in the way of warmth. So waking up in the morning, hoarfrost on the bare beams above you meant that you were motivated to get dressed quickly and get the hell out into the main room.
I always love that story. Now let's get to the other fun stuff. You had a horse, and you had to go to school some distance away, I think.
We had a horse, old Jim. I hated him. Even the memory of him, I still hate him. But yeah, Jim was, I think probably why I hated him, I think he was smarter than I was. When Dad wasn't using him, like I say, we could use him to go to school back and forth. Otherwise, we walked, and it was, the school we were going to at the time would be about 5 to 6 kilometers away. So it was a reasonable hike, especially in the wintertime. Mm. But school days, I'd go out to get Jim, and he'd be standing out in the middle of a swamp. So I had to go chase him down, bring him back, and get harnessed up and off to school. Weekends, though, no. Jim was right there at the barn waiting to get his feed of oats. So that horse could tell time and had a calendar built in, I think. That in itself, that wasn't too annoying. I mean, okay, fine. He didn't want to go to school. I understand that. I didn't want to go either at the time. But what was really irritating with him, every spring, he decided that, well, I want to go someplace. And he would just take and walk through the barbed wire fence. He'd just walk right straight through it. And off he'd go. And guess who had to go find him? So I'd be gone all day just walking down trying to find that horse again. And eventually, he didn't go far. I don't know what he was thinking or looking for, but regular as clockwork, every spring he would take off or try to take off. I'd walk him down, bring him back, and that was it for the rest of the year. But so, yeah, I wasn't real fond of him. Plus, we had the occasional adventure together.
Yes, tell me about an adventure that you had with the horse.
This particular time, it was, I don't know why it was just me that went to school that day, because my brother would have been old enough to go at the same time. But at any rate, I'd ridden old Jim, and we're talking about an old Clydesdale. No saddle is going to fit that so-and-so. And we didn't have a saddle. I rode him bareback. So we're coming back from school, and when you think of the road, you have to think of basically just barely enough room for two vehicles to get by each other if one of them pulls off to the side and the other one inches by it. And bush on both sides. I mean, this is Northern Saskatchewan. Before it's developed, it is forest. So coming down this road and round a corner, I guess the wind must have been just perfect or perfectly wrong for everybody, that is. Come around the corner and bang, we're face to face with this black bear. Well, the bear just sort of went woof, paws up, and wham, he took off running into the bush. Old Jim went woof, hooves up. We got no saddle. I went sliding straight down off of Jim's back, woof on the ground. Jim decided there was no way he wanted to stick around there, and he took off. And I was left sitting on the ground wondering what happened. Thinking about it, some belief systems use animals as totems. And I think probably considering all of the run-ins I had with bears over the years, the bear could be considered my totem because he was sure involved in an awful lot
of your life. Where else were the bears?
Well, didn't really happen to me, or well, it happened with the family, but every year you ordered chickens by mail. You put in an order to Sears and Roebuck, and they'd fire you up a whole bunch of young chicks.
Yeah, live ones.
Yep. So we had these little fluff balls. Well, Dad took and built a little shelter right directly under his bedroom window so that, well, he could keep an eye on them. And woke up this one night to hear some scuffling outside. Looked out the window, there was a bear trying to get at the young chicks. Dad always kept his 303 handy, so it was right there. He opened the window, shot the bear. We had bear for supper, and the chicks were all okay. So there's that one. Then leaving the farm, I was actually going to school again this one time, only this time walking. I was walking along, and all of a sudden off to in the bush there, I heard this crash, rustle, branches breaking, etc. And okay, it's a little alarming. I mean, I'm by myself, there's animals in the bush. Looked over, and there's this black bear going down the tree in pretty good hurry. I'm assuming he saw me and didn't particularly like the sight, but I didn't like his sight either. So I turned around and started heading for home again just as quick as I could go. And suddenly realized, well, if I went home, Dad was just going to turn me around and tell me, get back to school, damn it. So I turned around and ran the other way and went to school.
Now, you've got another bear story, because apparently, and I don't know where this was, you had a broom and whacked the bear in the bum or something. What was that about?
Actually, there's a couple of stories. The bear with the broom, that was, you mentioned I decided at 16 I didn't like farming. Well, this was my first summer after I decided I didn't like farming, and I'd gone out to Banff because I'd been told they were always hiring. They needed people out there. So out to Banff. And
that would be in Alberta, the next province over.
Yep. And got myself a job at one of the lodges there. Well, a large part of my job is just cleaning up the grounds. And the grounds needed regular cleaning because the bears kept on coming around and knocking garbage cans over and checking out whatever was thrown out. We didn't have bear-proof garbage tins at the time. So we were sitting down after the day's work was done. Everybody were gathered around the table there having a coffee, just talking. Heard this bang, bang crash outside. And my immediate reaction after just having cleaned up a whole mess for the day and feeling a little tired was that damn bear. So what do you do if you've got a damn bear out there? Well, obviously you head for the door, grab a broom as you're going through. And when you see the bear with his head in the garbage can, you go whap on its butt with the broom. The bear goes woof straight into the garbage can, and it takes off with it's still wearing the garbage can. And if you've got any sense at all, well, if you did have, you wouldn't have whacked the bear with a broom. But if you have any sense at all, you get the Dickens back into the building where it's relatively safe. So yeah, the bear took off one direction, spreading garbage as he went, and I took off back into the building, spreading good sense as I went.
So that bear was the beginning of takeout, right? Because he took his garbage with him there with the.
He definitely took the garbage can for a little bit of a run before he got rid of it.
Oh dear, I don't know just what else I've got here. The sleeping quarters and the bears and school. Oh, I got it here. The roads and the vehicles. You said that the roads would be so bad. Now I'm not sure which location you're in for that one. Probably after your dad sold the original one and moved a little bit more south.
Everywhere.
Oh, everywhere. You could only travel the roads on certain times.
Well, during spring breakup in particular, the frost would be coming out of the ground, the snow would be melting, of course. And there was nothing but gumbo, really. The roads were basically just somebody had taken a caterpillar and knocked all the brush down. And okay, here's a flat surface. But it wasn't prepared. There was no underlay or anything to give it a firm surface. So when you drove down there, if it was wet, you sunk. I mean, and the land itself, it was very good farmland. I mean, the people that farmed there made a good living. Well, they didn't have money, but they made a good living.
Yes.
So, but come spring breakup, that just turned into absolute gumbo muck. And the only way you could go anywhere, Dad would go into town for groceries, and you'd have to wait until late at night until the ground froze, then drive over that and get back and forth. So to go shopping, you'd go in early in the morning, wait all day, and then come back around midnight when the ground froze again, and you could drive on it.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, you didn't go into town unless you had an absolute need to for about a month.
For a month, yeah. We used to have our little run into Frankfurt. That was our Saturday night out on the town. Mom got the groceries and Dad would visit around town, and us kids, and that was our big adventure. We'd get a licky cone and walk up and down the streets and have our adventures. But yeah.
Well, we didn't go to town as kids. We didn't go to town during the spring at all. I mean, what would they do with us?
Yeah.
And still, also, of course, during spring breakup, there'd be quite a bit of increase in water level as the snow melted and rivers started to flood. Well, our bridges were rather primitive as well. So the bridge was designed to float. It was a wooden bridge, and it was designed to actually float on the water. So they'd take and use the steel cable to tie it down upstream. So flood comes, it rises, but the bridge stays in place. You can't get to it because, there's water on both sides of it, but the bridge is still there. Well, Dad decided that, yes, you could get to it. All you had to do was take a couple of planks and lay them down from the shoreline that was still dry onto the bridge that was floating, drive up on the planks onto the bridge, pull the planks up, pop them over the other side, and drive off. So, you could get there. And he did. But he had an old, what was it, Model T, one of the early beasties. Well, that thing would go just about anywhere. And Dad was a main supply agent. He'd take orders from everybody in the neighborhood and make a run into town. He was the only one that had something that could get through. So
Your father had to be, I mean, farmers in general are geniuses at invention because you have no place to go get it. You have to create. You have to create. But your father was really quite a genius in making everything work. He had his building skills, his mechanical skills, and his I'm going through it skills.
Well, Dad was Dad was a trained mechanic. He was a mechanic in the war with
Okay.
in one of his main jobs at one point there. I know when they were going through Holland was in tank repair.
Mm.
So he was the head. He was the head mechanic for his shop. So he had that. What was I thinking? I sort of got sidetracked. But farming, yeah, we might have always had plenty of food on the table and clothes on our back, but money we didn't have. So on a fairly regular basis, Dad would take a trip down to the area that I come from originally, Southern Saskatchewan, and they'd go around, pick up all of the old machinery that somebody else had decided, nope, this is no good anymore, and it's got some new stuff now. He'd buy that at next to nothing, haul it back up, and fix it up and use it for the next 3 or 4 years until it finally did break down and he couldn't fix it anymore, and then he'd sell it for scrap metal. So, but yeah, he was most definitely he was extremely handy with mechanical and general building. So
Yeah. I think that covers everything that I had in my little article. And it's just a fascinating story. I'm so thrilled that you agreed. I know you like to keep it pretty low profile, but this is a story that I was just so happy to hear and so thrilled that you agreed to it. What would be your closing words for the audience today?
words of wisdom.
Yes.
Well, one that I learned growing up: don't eat yellow snow.
We'll let people think about that one because they don't always recognize that one. I'm not even going to tell it.
But
Don't eat the yellow snow.
mostly, I think I remember a line from a song, something about I've seen 80 summers. Some were winners and some were bummers. And yeah, I have seen 80 summers now, and there have been winners and bummers. But keep on putting one foot in front of the other, and it isn't too bad.
Well, you've cheated death a couple times. I see you for 28 days, and 4 months later you came home. And the second time you said, "Oh, I guess I won't stay quite so long this time." So we're just thrilled every time that you ran into those big bummers, that you were right back here. And you're right. We just have to keep on keeping on. When it's time to go, we'll go. And when it's time to be here, let's live.
And one thing, one thing I've always believed is, I mentioned this earlier, that I cannot, and you cannot, nobody can pay back all of the people who have given us a hand.
No.
So spread a little of that forward and see if you can make a difference along the way.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.